No pressure.
How long has it been?
Don't even.
Don't even ask. What's up, guys? Morgan Clarke here. It's been a little while. I know, and I feel like I need to say something about that because here, we'll go to where the T100 is because we're going to talk about the T100 because it's really cool. If you look at it, that's a vibe. It's been a bit of time, and I don't have a particular like reason or excuse. It's really like between Joey and I. Joey's the guy holding the camera right now. Between Joey and I, we've just been doing life. The projects have been just nonstop. The work has been nonstop, and really, I have been on a pretty gnarly path of personal development and growth, and just kind of weeding things out and bettering myself, my mental health, my physical health, my family, and everything around me is kind of blossoming like that. So, I think just this like lapse in having YouTube content is not really by design. It's just how it's been, and it's just been life. And I know it's really important for us to kind of get back on track, and it's really for you guys. And you know, for myself too. I told Joey, even when like I was stressed out on stuff, like I told Joey, I said, God, we just need to, the YouTube's vital for me because I love to share. Part of my growth is just sharing with you guys, and you know, not just sharing this process, just sharing the journey and sharing life. And so that's just what we've been doing. But I hope we can kind of get back on it. I think for the Fab Diary stuff, that's one where I've just been so busy and so focused on getting stuff done and out of here. And our capacity, we're running at max capacity here. What does max capacity look like? That looks like 4 guys total and 9 projects in different forms. I thought it was 6, it's 9. And getting some of those shored away to the point where we can knock some of that off the list. You know, I talked to Mike Cox a couple weeks ago, and I was just sharing a bunch of stuff. And, you know, one of the things he said is he's like, it's easy to get cool projects in the shop, and it's hard to get them out. And that resonated with me. I don't think it's just easy to get cool projects. I think you need to, that's part of what you build as a person and as a brand. But I do agree that, you know, finishing these things and getting them out of the shop in one way or another is definitely the more difficult of the task. And getting them out doesn't necessarily mean finishing. It means working on the stuff that makes sense, getting the stuff out of the shop that doesn't make sense, whatever that looks like. Right now, I want to cover the T100. So this is Amir's T100. The T100 is a predecessor to the Tundra. If you guys don't know, I'm sure all the diehard Toyota guys know exactly what's up, but before they had the Tundra, they had the T100. They had a single cab option, and you usually would see a long bed single cab with every gardener tool in the back, cruising around in like gated communities doing yards. And there was a couple extra cab T100s built. There was a really badass one on desertrides.com. They had a forum, and it was all black, and this guy built like tube chassis, no floors, like the, you know, your classic dream build, right? Everything ground up, just a shell of a cab, LS. When was that? That must have been around 2006, 7. That one was built, and then this is Amir's, and Chris Allen with Allen Motorsports and Brian, Performance Metal Co. Brian, they constructed this for Amir. And this is an almost tube chassis car, very similar to Vivian or a lot of cars that are like center mount, and they're not a complete tube chassis. They have like 3 to 4 feet of frame, and that's what's going on under here. But this is a center mount. It is beautiful. It cycles awesome. Triangulated 4-link. And then what's under here is a dry sump 7-liter LS7, just like straight out of a C6 Z06. So it didn't come out of a car like that. It came brand new from GM, but it's the same thing you'd get in the dry sump, and everything in here is straight off of a C6 Z06. I know Amir through Instagram, and I've met a lot of friends and clients through that platform. It's been great for the business and for marketing, and it just in general for like exposure. You know, when I started Instagram, I think it was 2012, and it was just a very nice outlet for sharing what I was passionate about and sharing my work. And so I really just haven't stopped doing that, and what it's turned into is rendering a business from it. I knew Amir from there. I talked to him, and Amir's got a very tasteful collection of like off-road cars and street cars. He's got some really badass stuff, and he had this thing built by Chris, you know, roughly 10 years ago, and he wanted us to update it and put our touch on it, and that's a pretty common thing that we've done with several vehicles, and I like that. It's a challenge. It's not so much building something from the ground up, but it's starting with enough of a platform that's already badass, and then like updating it, or like I said, putting our touch on the thing and kind of giving it like a signature, unique look. And we've kind of become known for doing stuff like that. So that's the same thing with this. I went down to his house. I checked this thing out there and kind of went through with him like what stuff that he thought would be cool to upgrade. And then I gave him a rundown. I kind of did a design consulting with him. Said, you know, I think we should do this. I think we can do that. And this will really give it like a rebirth and a second life, and give it kind of a new modern approach to what was already good. I'm gonna get this over with really quick because this is a long one, and then we can kind of just dive into this thing as it appears. Big upgrades, and some of this stuff, like we started off with general ideas and concepts on this, and then it turned into like more detailed stuff, and then can we do this and can we do that? And I'm totally okay with that. The only thing that does is it upsets timelines as far as getting things completed. Because when you start adding stuff, I have kind of a chunk of time that I estimate for what's going to be done that we talked about. And then when you start adding, obviously it extends that. And then we're jamming up stuff to an extent. Update the car. Big rear shocks, new shock mounts, flip hood, AC, front bumper, rear tin, roof scoop, lighting package, fuel filler, power windows, dash, center console, mirrors, seats, upholstery, 40s, hub strengthen, grill shell, grill mesh, exhaust wrap, fire suppression, storage boxes, and then I have on here just kind of the color stuff. Creepy, huh? Okay. Olive green and gray on this thing. So that's like your big long list. Right off the bat, Amir's got like a cooling situation. And I always like, if you give me the opportunity to do a roof scoop on something, I'm gonna jump on that opportunity and get some sort of air compacting and ducting towards the rear of the car through a roof scoop. So this car already, it has a very organic presence to it. What I mean by organic presence is like, Joey, if you stand back there and you can kind of get even like passenger front in this whole thing, there's not a ton of like square shape or geometric shape. There's a lot of flowy, more natural shapes in this. And that's what we wanted to like stick to. And when you're working around this, you already kind of go into autopilot, at least for myself, like with the design language, I can focus on the shapes that the car is already presenting. Like even this front glass, we knew we were gonna keep this. And if you see like how voluptuous this thing is, where it's just, like I said, it's organic. It's more streamlined than just like a lot of contours and breaks and angles. It has this shape to it. So same with adding a roof scoop, like this is fully functional. What I was saying is there's cooling issues. If it doesn't have something like that, there's oil and there's trans back here. And for some reason, like the trans would be getting hot. I think it's also because the exhaust was going under the chassis, and then it was pretty much just dumping here. And you can actually see it through there. I don't know if you can. Do you see the cuts? Yep. So I think that's part of it too, is like you're have this big, like these voids in the chassis back here they do that. They make like a little heat box, and they don't get good flow, especially when the car is moving. They get more exhaust when, like, and I mean exhaust from like the fans pulling air through. They get more of that when they're sitting or they're just going 5 miles an hour. Vivian, or when she was the T100, same issue. And I've seen it like through and through. So we'll reroute the exhaust. Roof scoop talk really quick, and then we can kind of like I said, I don't have a particular order here, but you can kind of see what's going on. This guy flows from the front. Obviously, like with any kind of ducting, like NACA ducting, you want to start with a smaller entrance, and then you want to exit with a bigger entrance, so it adds kind of a vacuum or a pull. And that's why that thing tapers right at where the air is flowing off the windshield, grabs all that, kind of compresses, and then widens, throws everything down here. This is like a barrier, and this guy directs everything. So it'll go in there and it fastens. So if you look under here, can you get under there, Joe? If you look under here, then it'll hit, transfer this guy, and throw it into the mesh for the coolers, instead of kind of going into a wasteland where the third brake light would be. So the RTL bar is not in there, but I think you'll understand it. And you know, next update, this will probably just get one more update where it's complete. Like, we're already pretty deep into this thing. And that's, like I said, we've had like the Expedition we kind of missed on. Hopefully we can film an update when it comes back again in April. But there's just been a couple cars that have gone through, or we missed the mark on getting an update like for YouTube on them. It is what it is. So stuff for the back that piggybacks like off of the roof scoop. I mean, obviously, like, I have boners for roof scoops. It's a known thing. I could sit and talk about roof scoops all day. Like, the first one I did, and I think that I got them from a lot of aviation stuff. When I was a kid, like, I loved World War II, like warbirds, the P-51, like some of the B-17. There was just such striking, amazing design in that, and when you look at those, they're like the most beautiful functional design that you can. It's like the top tier of functional design. And I think a lot of that stuff left imprint in my brain of like what I want to do or build. And so just naturally, like, those kind of shapes, that's like very nourishing to my brain. With that, a lot of these like earlier builds, and we're talking like early 2000s, 2010, I don't know when the transition happened where people started buying big ass shocks and putting them on pre-runners, because a lot of the time, just only some of the top tier pre-runners would have like a 4-inch, like a King Kong in the back for a bypass, and a 3-inch coilover. And most of these cars, they had a 3-inch or a 3.5-inch bypass at most, still retaining a 2.5-inch coilover. And so part of the update on this thing is like, hey, can we put bigger shocks? Not so much on the front. Like, the front doesn't get worked nearly as hard as the rear. These trucks, they require a lot more in the rear. And it's funny, I always tell people, like, even if you have like a little mid-travel, you have a Ranger with like a 5.5-inch kit on the front, and you link the rear and you run it like that, it's gonna do good. It's the rear that needs help always, and wants all the up travel, and wants better valving, and wants proper weight distribution. So with that, Amir had a 3-inch and a 2.5-inch coilover, and we did a big upgrade to a 4.5-inch piggyback bypass 7-tube. Left the 2.5-inch coilover, but really just getting better dampening was like the name of the game on this thing. And with that, like, putting a bigger diameter shock in here, it was so close to the chassis that we needed just to fudge them out enough. Not where they're like inverted, but they're just out enough past 90 where we're getting clearance and we're not shitting the bed on like major, like when the thing swings, you know, because when a triangulated 4-link swings, it actually does this motion. And this is pretty exaggerated, but if you're looking at the back of the truck, you know, it does up and down just fine. But once you articulate, it will start to swing in favor, you know, inboard. So just, you have to think about that. And I've always pressed on that with setting stuff up back here. And so in the story here, we needed to put a different shock mount. The different shock mount lent itself to capitalizing on all this organic design. And even if you look, Joey, why don't you come to the side profile? Like if you see even the side profile, like trying to retain more organic, natural shape versus like the other way you could do this is if you could just put brakes in and it would be really easy. This is all 125, so 1/8 inch chromoly plate, and it's all bump formed. So it looks like it's natural, but this is all very small amounts of bumps, and this thing is like twisted in a way where it lands perfectly tangent on here. And it's a ton of work, but the result, like, you know, it speaks for itself as far as how natural it fits into the chassis. These are parts that usually I would specify, hey, build this thing on the car, tack it responsibly where we can cut it off, and then let me weld this thing on the table. This particular part we welded on the chassis because I think for Alex, he was kind of using this as a fixture to get this stuff right. But a lot of this stuff I got just laid down right on the chassis. And it was pretty easy. So that was part of what had to happen. There was a tube that was running out of here. I kind of inspected the chassis and I go, okay, well, if we're going to delete a tube that goes out around the shocks, dives back in over here on the down tube, can we safely do that? Or is that going to compromise structural rigidity? Structural rigidity. Give me a break, okay? And it doesn't. There's like multiple redundant systems of a C-pillar in here. And all your rigidity comes from your chassis lacing through here. So really just when you're doing big shock mounts like this is like, if you don't consider this tube here, there's just this large thing hanging off, and then your coilover is really what's kind of putting pressure on that because that's the sprung part of the rear of the chassis. So having a stabilizer tube come in and land somewhere to kind of hold it so it doesn't have lateral stress is key. And I think that's just where we dove that thing. There's a little partition in there for proper miter, and then it's just right smack dab in there to support everything. So it acted as a win. One of the things that, like, I know with this T100 and Amir's truck in particular is, like, he runs paddle tires, brings it to Glamis mostly. It's not like a full desert truck. I mean, it's built definitely to handle desert stuff, but it's really like a Glamis truck. And what that looks like for him is like no bedsides, scat track paddles, big roost. And I'm like, okay, how, like, what has stuck? And I don't think I really like have this conversation, but digesting it now, I'm like, what has stuck in my brain were like memorable looking profiles of cars. And I've always loved like a, you know, if you call this a haunch, like a higher haunch in the rear of the chassis, and then they kind of dive in, and a lot of like pre-runners, like growing up, that like I was inspired by, things I would notice is this like cropped back window. And what I mean by that is they would, like, the shock mounts usually shorten wheelbase, and then the shocks would be so much into the extra cab of the chassis that they wouldn't be able to run a full window, just for chassis layout and also for like serviceability, like getting to the shocks and where they need to function the best. So they would always like cut the bottom of the window or put like a new piece of glass in that's shorter, and it's the top height is the same, but the bottom is cropped, and then there would be like chassis tubes kind of coming out here that would be a little higher up. And this is just like, this is a profile change that doesn't really, like, it doesn't follow any chassis tubes. I built all this in, like the chassis tube is here. So your shock mount lands in here structurally at the tie-in point, and then your chassis tube lands here, ties into this lower guy. But what I want to do is just add a little more surfacing on this thing to where you see like the air comes through here, jumps down, follows this plane, this angle, that all goes into venting. So there'll be mesh right here. This whole entire void is full of coolers. There's another cooler here. So it also can exit, stuff can exit through here. So it's not like, that's the one thing is you have venting and you have like extraction, and the more the merrier as long as you put it in the right spots, because the same time, like if you do full enclosure on something like this, and you're just forcing air into one spot and it can't get out, because sometimes you're forcing too much, or sometimes stuff needs to leave instead of just get compounded into an area. So having extraction points too is healthy. And that was one of the things we added here, is the exhaust is exiting there. You have hot fan air that's going down and being pulled down. and you're kind of making this little turbulent hot box back here. And just having some exhaust from that is super helpful. So we got a profile win. We tied right into the shock mounts. We kept all the organic shapes and all these kind of flow all the same, matching the front, running through the whole car like that, and just re-tin this thing. The other thing I noted was the fuel fill. Like this is a dated situation, right? And I get this, and there's nothing wrong with this, but just when you want to like modernize like this setup, this is a badass truck. Like however you want to cut it, it's a little lightweight thing. It's got all big parts on it. It's fast. It's got nice wiring. It's got good work on it. It's all TIG welded. Like it's a good car. Well, almost all TIG welded. Rear fuel cell. This is like just a 40 gallon. It's a racer tank. I don't know if Racer still makes fuel cells, but it's like your Jeep Speed style now they call it, where it's got like a kick in the rear. And this is the filler for it. So just want, like these are really small wins. I don't know if we have the Geyser fill here, but Geyser Brothers sells a fuel fill, and it's a cap and it's a dry break in one. It's a nice billet piece with like a tapered fill. And you know, mounting those, like they're a clean little addition. That's a detail that we do on everything. Like Kevin's truck has it, Vivian has it, the Truggy has it. Just like I said, everything we do, I just budget that thing in because it's so nice. And it's like, you get a little dry break win, it's fully billet, like it's anodized. It's a, you know, you can't miss on that thing. So we'll do, instead of these elbows, we'll just do a straight shot out of the fuel cell into hardline with a nice new filler. One of the big additions was seeing if we can run 40s on this. So this thing's been on 37s its whole life. The 40-inch tire and seeing a lot of cars on 40s these days, it's not like a trend thing. I know they look cool, and anytime you take a bigger tire and you put a low stance car onto it, and it has those proportions that are kind of like cartoon, but also just they're proper. It looks, you know, 40s look awesome on cars, but really the performance you get from them and the functionality they present in a car is far superior to a 37. It is the way it is. You get through the bumps better. It's a bigger tire. You're getting a better ride out of a 40. Now, in turn, a lot of cars that are built, you know, 10 years ago or something, they might not have the clearance for a 40. They might not fit. Usually it's not so much the rear, but it's the front that doesn't house a 40. And it's also the parts. You have to figure out, like, you know, a bigger tire is harder on all of your rotating assemblies. You know, all of the axles, the hubs, the bearings, the spindles, everything needs an upgrade. Now, can you take 40s and just put them on a tiny little shitty Kingpin off an F100? Totally. It's just a matter of how long can you run that? How safe is it? How fast can you go over big bumps before you pop a tire off and then your whole car is weeded up from a rollover? I don't know. So Amir's got all the big stuff on here. He's got big housing, big brakes, big hubs. Same with the front. The only issue he had is he does have a press-in snout. We can go look at the stuff on the front. But what I'm getting at is we are running 40s. We did need to, like, everything cleared back here. We just cut all of the Y-strap hooks out, and then we made a little retainer, just like a 1-inch backing retainer. So when this thing goes in, you can kind of cinch it down, pressurize it with a Y-strap, and you're good. But everything worked. Like the span of the chassis here is actually perfect for a 40. So it's nice to get little wins like that. But like all the bumper and stuff, we're gonna leave all this. It doesn't really, I don't think it needs to be updated to look any different. I asked Amir about the tape on all this stuff. And then part of me goes, well, you have like tape on here? Like, cause I've seen some people where they offload a roll of like duct tape or electrical tape onto their race car or something to like use it. And I'm like, is this what you did? He's like, no, man, it actually, like, for the paddles, they sandblast the shit out of all of the bedside mounts, you know, under power or whatever, just throwing a roost. So he taped this up, and I'm like, oh man, that's like, you're gonna do this to this truck, or you're just gonna tape up your bedside mounts. So I have it in there that we're gonna make just some sort of a shield, and that's really just gonna look like a nice, clean, styled aluminum panel that'll block this stuff, and then it can just be a splash guard essentially. That's all it's gonna be in, and that we'll just leave that thing raw. and it'll take a while. Maybe build it out at like 90 thou, just because when you're throwing like big, like coarse sand, at some point it's going to be abrasive and it's going to start wearing. And if we just do like 063 like we do with a lot of the panels, probably will deteriorate that pretty quick. So that's something we want to add on here. We've been looking at different bedsides. If you see the front, like even looking at the front fender from here, it's very organic and it's very smooth. And the rear bedside like does this thing where it comes up. It like comes up and it's like pointy. And it comes to a point, and you know, they call them like trophy truck bedsides, right? Where they, instead of being a flat top, they go like, you know, this big old thing. And it's just, it does this thing where it's like pointy, and then it's like flat or almost inverted, where it's not even leaning in towards the car, but it's leaning out like a, I don't understand the design. So we're looking at running a different bedside. If we can get it, it's just, the thing is, this thing cycles huge up travel. So it does need some sort of a rise. I don't think a flat top's just gonna work. On the subject of 40s, I just wanted to, I have a broken rib, so bear with me here. I'm probably gonna talk funny. If you look in there, into like where your rotor hat is, there's safety wire 12 points in there. I think you'll be able to see them. And you know, Amir's very into safety, making sure he's safe, making sure his life is safe and his kids are safe and his family's safe. Amir is a pilot. He's got tons of hours, multiple licenses. And one of the main things with the 40s and just in general on his front upright is he was concerned about the snout ripping off. And like, that's a huge fear of people, because when you're pounding through whoops and the front, like if this corner or the other corner breaks off, it's usually an imminent danger problem. It's not something where you can drive out of that safely. You're usually going to be in a situation where something's going to stick and pull and it's going to upset the vehicle to the point where it's not going to be on its wheels. So what we did is we kind of, by his request, took all that out, inspected, cleaned, and then on the snout, we beveled everything. We heated it up, stitch welded all the areas, made sure all the threads were good, retapped everything nicely. 12-point aircraft certified bolts, and then safety wired everything. So we did like a huge, we did a 3-in-1 on that, just to really lock down safety, and having good success with that. While we're under here, if we can see, there's no AC compressor right now, but there's a home where that usually lives right there. And we got a pretty good wind. We didn't really need to do much. You can kind of see the AC lines that are going here, but we have a bracket in here. AC compressor fits in the stock location where it wants to be. Runs off, you know, your belt system. It has its own secondary belt, just stock. That thing is out for powder right now. And then you can kind of see that there's AC lines going through. You can also see this bulkhead. Let me see if I get some light here. So we're running Resto Mod on this thing. I've worked with Vintage Air for years, and Resto Mod is just far superior. I don't know like how else to put that. So we put together a whole kit with Resto Mod, everything from their air dryer to their condenser, to their blower, to their vents. We have that whole thing. So a lot of the vent stuff we'll cover, and their other, like their control module and stuff we'll cover when the dash and center console are in there. But I just wanted to see, like, this is where we're at right now. And everything's kind of routed and planned for. And there's a condenser living up here. And what we'll do right now is we'll pop this hood off, and I'll kind of show you what's going on. Originally, we're going to run XL80s. This is not an XL80, this is an LP6 from Baja Designs. Obviously, we do everything with Baja Designs. They have a new DOT approved light that's an LP6 that has like a high, low, and like a running light, and it's certified DOT. So that means you can run it street legal. And this is a street legal car. Amir is going to have headlights now. This thing had just, if you see like the black graphic breakup, like that's how this whole thing was. So we just kind of made a cut that made sense. And then what we'll do, it's not going to fit in here because this bracket needs to be trimmed, but you can kind of understand the concept here. We'll scooch this guy inboard, and then what we'll do is we'll run an amber XL80 on the corner here, which is a little small square guy, but we'll run the DOT lights in this thing. So that was part of the program. He had like OG red ring Hellas that used to live in front of the grill. We're gonna bail on those. They also really made a potent increase in running temperatures. When he had all the lights here, like you would notice a huge difference in your coolant temps. So that's gone. We'll run one radius bar here. The grill situation here, you can kind of see like there's a lot going on. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but what he had is he had like a billet grill that spanned right to behind here. And it didn't span the whole width of like what this wants for a grill shell. So what we'll have is we will cut all this out, and then we'll incorporate a grill shell. Your typical T100, well, this would be a Tundra grill shell, and then just black mesh in here, and then just a radius 30-inch bar. So that'll complete this whole thing. This had a bumper on it, and like a bumper is a serious place for getting wins, cosmetically and for function. This thing had a like pretty dated bumper on it. I don't know if we can put a picture in or not. It doesn't really matter, but you know, stylizing a permanent bumper on this thing that complements the rest of the car and the rest of the shapes, that was a huge thing for this. So we cut everything off where we could, and then we redid the entire thing up here. It did have like the cuts that are in this one piece already. Those were here. They were previous cuts. So we tried to follow suit with what's going on. We did upgrade the tube size. It was 1.5 inch. We went to 1.75 inch. And then all the runner down here is all 2-inch. Nothing else on the car is 2-inch, but it doesn't matter. It's the front bumper. It's kind of more of a potent design feature. So it doesn't, your eyes aren't gonna like start looking at the rest of the chassis and think there's no 2-inch on here. It's just, it's a robust, nice shape that should be in there. Just to show you guys kind of like design flow on this thing. You see all the caps are squared off on the edges. Well, they're not squared off. Just to get more of an understanding on the flow of this thing. Let me move this light. You can see what we went for, just trying to transition all these shapes into the bumper, right? So there's like a cap that draws smooth into the same profile. And then what we've been doing with the bumpers is, ooh, I got a little voice crack. What we've been doing is we find this consistent roll. So this radius on the lower tube is what we set first, and then we'll roll like a longer piece, and what we'll do is we'll cut it where we want the junction to be and where the transition should be, because all the front of cars, like you can usually bank on most vehicles, trucks especially, they have one radius in the middle. Especially like, I don't know if I can show this properly, but they have one radius in the middle where the grill spans. And then when they get to the corners where the headlights are, they often tighten and they're progressive. So it's not just one consistent banana roll that goes through. It's really a radius here, and then it's kind of a dramatic pull into the corners. So what we do is we run this miter cut. And the miter cut lets us just take the roll that we have and then just whoop, and pulls it in. And it really works to just tighten back to the corner. And we've ran this on a couple cars now where it seems like just a good recipe for success in general. There's a couple more details in this thing. Like we wanted to retain this pusher that it has. Before it was straight tube out, and it was like super bonered, or it was just like 90s, like big 90s, like just very generic. This thing just don't, you know, it's loose on here, so don't hold me on the fitment right now. But you can see what we got for the presence. Same with like the scoop. Everything's kind of tied in, and once we fill the void, like I don't know if I've really necessarily been a fan of putting like aftermarket lighting in where the headlights go. Like my favorite look is to run an OEM headlamp, but I think for this car, like it is still kind of a hardcore pre-runner, and I think it'll make sense once we have the Baja design stuff. Other small details like I was talking about with the bumper, putting a subtle kick in, right? So this is not just kicked forward, but it's also kind of rotated. And it just helps the look. And then obviously focusing on putting design into the caps is helpful. So there's like a radius into these caps. It's not just a straight cap plate. And then the skid plate. So obviously you see too, there's valence tabs. There is a ABS valence that goes down here that's pretty tastefully cut. It does a weird thing where it almost looks like a mustache. I don't know. I'll get it out and just put it on the ground so you can see it. But all this stuff has nut plates in here. I really prefer a nut plate, which is just like a threaded piece. And that is so much better than having to reach around and do like have a nut on the backside, like a capture nut, or just a welded nut on a plate. Like these things are items that if they do get stripped or something, you can pop the rivets out and you can put new pieces in. And they're very strong as far as stripping. Like you usually will strip a bolt before you strip a nut plate. And I value that over the other way, you know, where you have something in the chassis that gets stripped out. Something to look at is the skid plate. So again, I know we're sitting here geeking on a bumper, but there's just so many wins to have on the front of a vehicle and the front view and its presence. And you know, that's what's so not entertaining, but something very attractive about the off-road cars is like their whole front view and how they look. And you can tinker with these things just the right way to get like really good design where it ties everything in, or it sets the tone for the rest of the car. So this skid plate is actually pretty long. And what it had before is it was straight all the way up, and it had a very small relief. And now you can see, like, if you're hitting this thing head on, the radiator is going pretty low, definitely going past the bumper tube. So you want to have venting where the air can come through and give that radiator every chance it has to cool the engine. So you can see there's pretty nice reveals in this stuff. And then, you know, I'll go back and forth on running like all countersink hardware on this stuff. Sometimes we'll just run bolts. It depends on how hard the vehicle is going to be used, because a lot of times if you're going to be contacting the ground, you don't want to run these Allens because they'll get ruined or they'll get packed. You know, in the bolt you can always just vice grip that stuff off and take it off by whatever means. You know, we'll always run countersink on like mesh stuff like this though. And again, that's just another opportunity to get some design wins. One of the issues with the one-piece clip, there was a long time where people weren't doing flip like hoods where the one piece would flip, and I think McNeil, like maybe Mark, started doing that stuff first. I don't know who is the originator of that, but it's definitely purposeful, because like with my Beth truck, I remember being stuck on the side of the 91 and I needed to check inside the engine bay, and I would undo the mini fenders, and then I literally, this whole thing, and it was like windy on the side of the freeway, and I'm taking these things are huge. They're over 6 feet wide. So grabbing them and finding a way to operate and pull this thing off without having like a structure in the car where it can flip up or flip back is just, you're shitting the bed, and it's a problem. It makes sense if it's a race car, because you can pull into a pit and multiple guys can grab it and take it off. But like when you're doing a pre-runner and something you're driving on the street, or you're just riding solo and you need to check in there, like you're at risk. And same with this car has these reliefs where the bumper comes through. So like, there's flimsiness to the point where there's cracks now because there's relief cuts in here for the chassis of the bumper or the structure of the bumper. And this whole thing is just flimsy, it's just fiberglass. So what Amir and I talked about is figuring out if we can either put a frame in here or like at a minimum, or have this thing flip and flip one way or another. Now this is severely limited again by like the bull horns coming through here. But what we do is we have a frame in here that's going to be tabbed in. There'll be some fender washers locating it on the hood, and then this whole thing will flip. I don't have this bolted on right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off with Joey, and then I can kind of show you all the framework that's under here because it's mid-construction. I think, yeah, best bet, yeah. And then put your hand under because it's going to want to crack. There we go. Okay, so what you see here, I like these kind of views, like where you see it's like a skeleton, like a exoskeleton for the hood, or I guess it would be an internal skeleton, but it's like it's bones under here, and you can see it's all, like you can figure out where the tolerances are, like around the bump stop. You can see where the mounting locations are, where we're going to want to pick up on the fiberglass. And then you can also see there's substructure built in. This substructure, these runner tubes, are built to hold the hinge setup. And this is what I usually have the guys do, right? So what you see here, this is like a really rough shape. And what this is for Alex to get the mechanism dialed. And it's almost like doing a rough draft. And you're not, you'll do your final draft next. But we'll rough this whole shape out and we'll get it exactly on the plane that we need. And we'll get the mounting surfaces dialed in and where the mounting locations are. And then I'll come in here and I'll sketch for them like what we want as far as the style goes in. So this is what I call chunking the thing out. And then I'll come in, I'll lay it out for them, and then they can fine tune it, cut it, put it back in, prep it, it's all nice. But this is really what it takes for rigidity, and this thing's still like, it's rickety right now because there's no gas struts on it or anything, so it's chilling. I think I can move it. But it's just not complete, but you'll understand kind of the process here of what's going on. Now, here's the thing. If you watch the motion on this, other thing too, these are a hot rod hinge. We didn't build these. I think what we'll need to do is we'll build our own because I do notice that these lack a lot of rigidity. I think a better version of that's much more, I don't know if thicker, but just reinforced. When you start building, like especially on full sizes truck, like if you look over at Kevin's, that's a lot of structure. There is a lot of, that has a tilt hood that's operating the same way, and it's a ton of structure. Now you think you add that 1-inch tube, that's all that structure, and then you add fiberglass, which is varying thickness, and a lot of times it's heavy, and you add that to these small hinge mechanisms, and it's just not enough. So I think later down the road, if we build something, we'll build like a juiced out version that's just rigid and strong for trucks. That's the same thing, because really what you want to watch, and I can cycle this a couple times, is what this does. This isn't just this motion of it pivoting in one area, because that's a problem. And a lot of times, like if you have a front clip and you want that front clip to open, it can't just open up pivoting off one point of access, because it'll clash into the bumper. It needs something that goes up and over, and it does something where it's a multi-access mechanism. Help me out. So you see and how we figure this stuff out is usually we do like a 1, 2, 3, where we analyze how it's going to work, and everything's hand built. So, it's all custom. So we think, okay, well, we'll take this hinge and we'll start like just holding it up, and we'll cycle through. Okay, well, all right, it's going to do that. And once this, is it going to go high enough? Is it going to clear? What do we need to clear? The bumpers here. This upper pusher adds a different design element, where now we need to make sure that it's not, even if we get it to go up and over the lower tube, is it going to clear this? What's going to happen here? So, we do a general 1 where we go, okay, well, probably needs to be there. Then 2 is we go, okay, Don't take a lot of time and just get this thing shanty mocked up crude. Just put some plates in there that hold bolts and tack it somewhere where we can get a good prep on the steel still, and we're not going to ruin the prep. That's 2. Then we know that no matter what, once we cycle 2, whether it works or not, 2, the part of 2 is going to get us enough information. And then we go, boom, okay, that doesn't work, or it needs this. And then 3 is we lay a final one and we get it. And it's never been more than that. We got this one on 2. We looked at it. I kind of held it up. I go, okay, it would be really nice if this notch came close to here. We got to be mindful of the hood because the hood's attached to this. If this can go just enough, we can get it to here, we're good. And we sent it in a mock-up form and it worked. And this cycle, it doesn't stop on these hinges like it does right now because there's no strut in here, there's no air shock. But it comes, this whole clip goes right to the stopping point of the pusher. So we have all of this. The other thing to think about is like this is at the wiper cowl. So really the motor is like, and that's the whole point, you want this thing to go forward. All these trucks that are center mount, more or less that motor's so buried in there that like if your hood is flipping up this way, what's the point of it being here? Because you're having to work in the motor here, and like your belt system's going to be at the best here. It'll usually be here. So it's better to just have all of your big bulky shit move to the front, and then you get in here and you're like dialed to work on what you need. So that's what this is doing. And I can kind of run through this a couple times. So it's doing something here where it's not just a single pivot. And we found these, like, the way we got to this is Colin and I, we were on Kevin's truck, and this was like over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and we're like, how do we make the hood work? We need to like build hinges, and we did the classic. We took chipboard, we laid it out, and we had clipped pieces of TIG rod as like the pivot points, and we started just, I told him, I was like, I'm gonna go do this, just figure out, do your first mechanism. Do what you think is gonna work to make this thing get the hell out of its own way and clear all the other stuff, and do it in one smooth motion. He figures it out, and then I'm like, man, and I go online, I start looking at hinges, and then I get into like hot rod hinges and these custom hinges, and they literally do exactly what we needed. So now Kevin's truck, James's Frontier, Vivian, Eric's Vivian, and Amir's truck, they all have the same variation of hinges because they're like a blessing. They do exactly what we need. You know, and this whole thing, so like this will include all of the hood on here. It'll have gas struts, and then your lights will be fixed on the bumper. So even if he chooses not to run this, you still have a clean setup. All he's gonna have on here, if he wanted to take this off and just run like raw dog, just run the rear no bad side, run the front with no glass, he'd still have lights. He just wouldn't have any of the substructure of the hinge. He can just unbolt it from the chassis, and you just have a little runner tube. And when these things are pressurized, like this is just rickety where it's barely even bolted down. But you gotta think the capture, the bedside or the front clip will go through here, and then it'll capture on the mini fender. So this is captured down. This doesn't come up in any way because of how the mechanism works. So just boom, you'll have air struts on here or whatever. And when you just pull on one side or the other, then this whole thing will just want to come up. And then it'll live there. So if we can do this on any car that we build, that's the preference. Just for obvious reasons like serviceability, like you want it to still be a pre-runner. You don't want to have to use a buddy system to open your hood. Like that's a bust. Unless it's a process where you don't want to scratch something, but I just design the shit right the first time, and you don't have to do weird stuff or use more hands than you need. Stuff to see in here. I mean, if you want to come on this side, Joe. This is what we talked about. Like this is just your bread and butter LS7. This car is fast. It's light. I don't remember what the weight is, but it's light. We'll know when we get the shocks done because Keith's going to go through all the shocks and then we'll go tune it. But you can see like even the dry sump tank, that's all Corvette. So it's just like, it's nice because it's a turnkey package, and LS7s sound different. They have like a different reciprocating mass that makes them rev different. and they have a different sound to them, and they're very unique. I know Darren Parsons has an LS7, and I always kind of can tell that it's him based off of his engine noise. You can see our bulkhead. This is all Resto Mod Air. They have different setups like this, you know, and this is tying everything from the cab into the engine bay, and we'll run all this. And like I covered before, there's our condenser here, and that's just kind of floating. So there's nothing wrong with Amir's dash. What do you look at first? You probably go, yo, what is that air conditioner doing up like that? There is not a lot of room in this thing as far as like putting stuff, like if you look at the distance from windshield to face of the instrument panel, very short, a lot of cutting done. And then you start going, well, there's like firewall right there. So fitting a unit like a HVAC in the traditional spot where it's going to primarily, you know, more or less every car has it here. Even pre-owners have it here. You got to look at the spread of your intrusion bars and where are you going to fit this guy. And this is optimal because your feet for the third person can go under here, and you're not like, you know, if you wanted to build a center console, you're always wanting to go over here and figure out, like on Dan's truck, like elbow room. But really, this needs something more unorthodox to be comfortable for the third person. Like that's the thing, you kind of end up in a bed shitting situation if you're just adding 3 seats and you're not thinking about the center console. The center console will cripple a foot position for your third person, and a lot of times too, if you put that third person in a weird spot with their feet, they're going to hurt their backs in a different way because they're sitting in an orientation that is not favorable for going fast off-road. So that was priority 1. Priority 2 is putting the shifter in a good spot. And I'll come over there and sit in there for a second. So something to think about here. And this is just a suspension seat, but we're upgrading to Sparcos, so we'll have 3 Sparcos in here. But something to think about is the shifter position. There's like, just for anybody who doesn't put a lot of time into driving these things, both hands on the wheel, as much as you can have them on the wheel, is gonna favor you. If you're not just chilling, you're not doing that shit. You are being active and you're engaging your steering a lot. So the amount of time from right hand to gear selection is vital. And if you have this thing down here, I'm having, like, I'm doing one movement right here. One movement. If I have to go down here, I just move my whole elbow. So my time and my reaction time to whatever kind of scenario I'm going to be in is being compromised because of shifter location. So I will always favor, if we can, get a win where we put the shifter as close, safely close. Like if you're throwing hands, you don't want that thing super close, but you want it somewhere where it's comfortable and it's quick. And so this whole substructure you see here, that holds our air conditioner. It goes down to the floor, it grabs the shifter, and then it grabs back in down to the firewall down there, and there's another bracket that goes to the front chassis work to hold the AC. So this is like a nasty rigid setup. Another thing you want to consider is this shifter, you're putting a lot of work into these things, and you want to be able to slam, you know, without thinking that thing's attached to sheet metal. This is not something you want to build into a center console or build into your dash. You want to have a actual redundant substructure or subassembly that's going and then mounting itself somewhere rigid, where it's not just into tin work or aluminum. Let's talk about, so we'll cover one thing first. This is manual windows. We're definitely going to upgrade to power windows. We already have all the stuff for it. That was just a really easy upgrade. That's just something where we order that stuff up, we swap out the motor and the mechanism, whatever it needs. Door panels we're going to put in. This will probably be a simple version door panel like Vivian's, where it's kind of a hybrid. It's powder coated, and then it's got an insert of upholstery. It's got a pole. It's got a button for the power window, and then it's got your classic, like, we'll just retain this door latch and the lock and just leave it there and build off of it. I don't think we need to really mess with speaker stuff. We are going to add all PCI intercom and headsets. Something to stress, like for an investment, is fire suppression. If you really chalk it up to like bang for your buck and what you're doing, you're saving your car. I'm an asshole with that, where I'm like, we'll get out no matter what, but let's save the car. And more importantly, fire suppression systems are for saving your life and, you know, not getting you burnt. But the price point on these things, you know, a fire suppression system is $1,500. To hardline the thing in, it comes with, if you wanted to just DIY that thing, it comes with hardline, it comes with nozzles, it comes with a puller. You could put your own labor into that, and you're saving your $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $50,000 vehicle just by that upgrade. And it just makes sense on these things. You put so much time and so much money into these, and just to fires happen, and to see them just burn to the ground over a step you could have taken to have preventative maintenance for that not to happen is vital. So like all of our cars in here, it's the same thing. We all just, everything has Safecraft. I run 2 10-pound bottles on these things. The spec truck, Carry, the Bronco, Amir's car, the Frontier, all of those are on Safecraft. All of them have 6 nozzles. All of them run 2 10-pound bottles. So there's a huge benefit to having that stuff. I can't stress it enough. And that being said, Amir, this thing's going to get all fire suppression in all the vital areas. And then we talked about, like, originally we were going to just do a center console, and we were going to graft into this. We were going to, like, this is your generic Fiberworks or McNeil dash that's been covered or upholstered. And that, like, that works. We got to this point here where it's like, why are we doing that? Even if we upholster it, like, it'll work, but it's just, at the end of the day, you're still with this generic dash, and you want this, like, there's going to be some big, nasty, upgraded thing here with navigation, you know, and like this robust, like, badass shape tying into this thing. So we're going to upgrade and just do a full dash, a full center console. We'll do away with this guy, put that in like a Fiero, Ferrari or something, and put a proper steering wheel in here. We'll keep all the analog gauges, all mechanical like that. I love analog gauges. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. You know, there's really good wiring in this thing. So the only stress I might have is, like, if we adjust stuff too extreme, there's going to be some rewire involved, and that's a bust. So if I can do my duties as a good designer, I'll readjust this stuff, but keep the gauges in the same area and orientation, but just kind of adjust how much real estate in their footprint. So we're not doing rewires. Once we have dash, center console, door panels, all final, this will go to Todd at Expert Auto Upholstery, and we will upholster the shit out of this thing. We're going to do a headliner, we're going to do full carpet, and then we'll do all Alcantara stitch dash, Alcantara stitch center console, and then, like I said, the door panel treatment, probably be a little bit of both. I think we might do a recover on the seats, but like the goal with this is like, this gray is really beautiful, like a dark metallic. We're going to run an olive green, like a military olive green with black trim, and your main, so let's lay it out the right way. Your primary color is your gray, your dark gray metallic. Your secondary color is all your chassis, which is a black, and then your tertiary, or your third, will be an olive green. So we'll be like the beadlock rings. He has Robbie Gordon wheels, OG badass Robbie Gordon wheels, that'll be black with an olive green beadlock ring, and then like whatever kind of trim we can do in here, we put olive green in, that'll be the hit. All the new panel work, like the roof scoop and all the rear chassis stuff, satin black, just keep it simple. But if we can just do a couple little hints of that olive, it'll tie everything in really well. Just looking at the list, stuff we didn't cover yet. We're still gonna run a bar up here. There's some old stuff here, which is to the chassis. These are like standoffs. I have us, like, this is your classic design stuff, right? We're not starting from scratch. So how do you take something like this where it's welded to the body, it's welded down to the chassis? How do you make that go away without having to like repaint and do all kinds of crazy shit? And how do you get a win? And I have an idea with the light bar. Like, he wants auxiliary lighting here. He wants to have a light bar. So I think we run that thing lower than the roof scoop. And there's a pretty proper like plane separation here from like the strip on the glass and the lower portion of the roof scoop where we'll get that bar in. And I think we'll have an overlay that'll work with like safety wire, 12 points, all that big bracketry right here that'll lead into a nice mount for the bar. Something else, he wants to get rid of the mirrors. I think there's a time and place for OEM mirrors. I'm not like upset with that. Same with the lights, but this truck, it's an aggressive pre-runner. It's teeter-tottering on like looking like an extreme duty pre-runner. Super clean and sleek still, but same, like, we're gonna get that win with the Baja designs in the headlamp area. And then for the mirrors, we're gonna delete this and we're gonna do like a tubular race mirror. You've probably seen like crude examples of that on some of the Mexico pre-runners. A lot of Mexico-based pre-runners will have that because of just how much bushwhacking the car sides of the cars do. But I think adding like a nice small tube, you can have a lot of cool wins, or you can have a couple pickup points and you do it really clean. And you do like some small tube with a little mirror register. And I think we'll get something really good out of that. And I'm sure that sounds like a very cautionary thing, like, oh, dude, why would you do that, man? I'll just run the stock ones. But I promise this will come together. It always does. I think that's it. 40s. We need to put this thing back on 40s. So I think next update will, like, this is just me assuming here, but I think next update is you'll see dash in here, center console in here. This thing's sitting on 40s. Probably painted, powder coated, everything except upholstery. And then what we'll do is we'll check back in at that point, and then we'll send it to upholstery. And then of course this gets tuning. And that's, you know, this is, don't get it twisted. Like, I'm grateful for what we have. I am so grateful for my job. I'm grateful to wake up every day and be able to do this stuff. Like, this is a blessing. And as much as it's a business, it's still this amazing opportunity because I get to do something I love every single day. And that's like what my days consist of, is like building these badass machines for awesome people. And that is so huge. And I am not, like, I don't fall victim to dragging my feet and thinking this is some bullshit job. Like, I love this. And I don't know if that's ever going to go away. And I'm forever grateful to be in a position where I can be here with Joey and we can be talking about trucks and sharing the stuff with you guys. Like, when I was younger, when I was 15 and 16, I was just barely seeing these things. And I was so enamored by, what are these amazing machines? And to be doing this stuff, I've reached somewhere where I can, and I'm super grateful. And I think there's a lot more in store for my life specifically, as far as like a builder and a designer. But right now, don't get it twisted. Like, it's a beautiful opportunity. Part of that beautiful opportunity is being able to just get a taste of each one of these things. And what I mean by that is going out and testing them and being able to shock tune, and that's enough for me. I don't need to take this thing and own it. Like, it's the same with the Truggy or anything else. Like, it's and Vivian, just being able to, this is where my heart is in the build, and in creating these things and seeing them run at their full potential, and taking something that was already cool and then making it something completely unique and amazing. Like, that's our bread and butter. And that testing phase, like where we get that last bit of crucial investment into these things. You can build these awesome cars, and if you don't tune those shocks, they will work good out of the box, but they will not do what full tuning will do. These cars turn around night and day when you tune them. And what that means is, like, that's the same thing with Vivian and the Truggy. We do full corner scale weigh. We do all the measurements that Keith Marigold needs. He takes all the shocks before we go out. He takes them all apart. He does all of his science to those things that makes them perfect for the car based off of calculations. It's not just like, sick, bro, maybe, a little more shims there. It's educated shit. And we put them back on, and then boom, we go out and we push the car. put it through whatever conditions it's going to be most extreme pushed. And that sounded weird. We go out and test the car and push it. And then Keith will do whatever adjustments to the shocks as like a fine tune out there. I'm probably repeating this because we've done this already, but what I'm getting at is that's the last phase. And then you see them off and that's it. And we're good. I'm good with that stuff. And I think everybody at the shop enjoys that same process. That's kind of the cherry on top. So again, grateful guys. I'm glad we're back. We are going to launch merch for the holidays. So Thanksgiving's passed, at least for Christmas and New Year's, we should have our merch back up and should be kind of running a pretty solid game with that stuff. Thank you so much for sticking around and thanks for the support and have a great Monday.